Today we're going to be replacing a damaged rear armored brake line on this 3/4 ton Chevrolet truck. This is a 99 Suburban diesel. Let me show you how we get this off, and I'll show you how we're going to fix it. There's a couple of metal welded on tabs. There's one here and there's one over here. You can get a screwdriver and prise up so that you can, be very careful in case you got a rust problem, so that you can get this guy out. And then at the top, what I've done, I already had to remove this, and you can see at the top what I've done is on the brass brake block, I've put a little red plastic cap to keep any more brake fluid from leaking out over there. And then on this side, you can see there's a red cap on the wheel cylinder. And this is actually what happened. I needed to put a new rear wheel cylinder on this, and it was so rusted up that I could not free it up, so I had to sacrifice the pipe. So let's come over and I'll show you how to replace this pipe. So this is what this line looks like. There's actually a piece on the end here that I cut off because I needed to take a look at the kind of fittings that are on here. These are kind of a different kind of a fitting than you can normally get. You have to go to your GM dealer and get them. There's a 9/16 hex head, and then the other side is the standard thread. But besides that, the other end I had to sacrifice, like I was mentioning, in order to get it to let go, which is the piece that would have angled over into the wheel cylinder. But we'll be able to restore all that. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to get a part that'll help you with this. GM doesn't sell these. They never sold any of these individual brake line pieces. But you can go over to Napa and you can get a pre-made one of these. We're going to use this as a basis where you have the armor already on there. This is what this sometimes called a rock guard. But it typically is just some steel spring around the brake line itself. This is 3/16 line, and then this is on there. This particular one here is 40 inches long, and we're going to end up cutting it to size on both the spring and the pipe. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see what do we need, what are we measuring. So I'm going to measure this armor spring first to see how much of that I'm going to retain. And there's no rocket science to this, right? You're just going to get a tape measure and go down and see what it is. Of course, it is a little bit tricky because it's going to want to move around. You're going to have to hold it really tight. I'm going to go around these bends. And you're just going to try and get it as close as you can. Obviously, it doesn't have to be super exact, but we want to get it as close as we can. And then after we do the spring part, we're going to go and measure the line itself. And in my case, since I had to cut a few pieces up, we're going to measure the main line, and then we're going to measure the individual pieces that we've got left laying around. And then when I get to the end here, what I end up doing is rounding this guy up a little bit. Let's just see where we land. So it's just looks like it's like 26 and it's like 26 and just under a quarter. It's like 26 1/8. So I'd probably just go 26 1/4 actually, just to account for any variances. So I'm going to write that guy down here, and then we're going to measure the pipe itself. You can tell it's probably going to be over 30 inches, and that's why I grabbed the 40-inch version of this. Now, they don't stock this particular thing in Napa stores, but you can order it online and have it delivered free to the store. In my case, it just took a day, and it's a pretty good deal. I think it was $6 and something. I grabbed two just in case I make a mistake. It's not like I do this kind of work all the time. Unlike electronics, I'm much more comfortable with. Bending brake lines I might do once every 2 or 3 years. All right, so I've got just under 30 inches for the line itself. I'm just going to go ahead and call it 30. And then I'm going to take a look at these pieces that I had left over and see what I've got. If I was to put them all down here, just to try and get this good of a fit as we can. Looks like another 2 inches worth. So I'm going to call this a 32-inch pipe that we need for the brake line itself. So the parts you'll need, so besides this Napa 40-inch line, it comes in a 30. Obviously that's a little bit too short for us. And the part number on this, let me see if I can get it where you can see it, is 8131191 armored brake line. And the other part that I picked up at the local dealer is a 157-20627. And what this is, I mean, you're not going to get these in an individual bag because they're going to have like a box of like 100 of them or whatever, and they're just going to sell you the individual ones. But like we were showing on the old one, it's a plated 9/16 hex head tip, and then an inverted flare to go around the 3/16 line. I think this is just a standard 3/8 thread. So we've got our parts. Let's get started. So I'm going to take one of these guys, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off these standard fittings because it's too long to use as is. So one's too short and one's too long. So couldn't find anything that I could have bent without modifying it, or I might have tried just to leave these standard kind of fittings on. But since I had to cut it anyway, I prefer to put the actual GM stuff on there wherever I can. Like I said, they don't make the brake pipe itself. If you had this problem happen in the day when these things were still serviced regularly by the dealer, they would have just told you they were going to make pipe for you, and they would have had GM stock pipe and armor, and they would cut it to fit, not unlike what we're doing. So this is really hard to hold because the armor is going to want to turn on you. It's going to get it a real tight grip. I like using these little guys, usually. I like turning it away from me. But you're going to take a little bit longer because of the armor and the tendency of the armor to mess up your ability to hold the thing tight. So you have to go in much shallower than usual with each twist of the cutting blade. But it will eventually go through here. And then we'll get this off. And then what we'll do is we'll cut the pipe to length. We'll cut the armor to length. We'll put the fittings and this armor back on, and then we'll re-flare the end piece. Just want to go slow. It does take a bit of time. And then after that, we'll do what I think is probably the hard part, which is the bending. We'll be bending it with the armor on. It's not super different than if we had no armor. We'll just be using the pipe bender on a larger setting than 3/16. Of course, when you get stuck, you try to go back in the other direction. Pull this spring back and get a better grip on the pipe. There we go. All right. So it takes a while, but this is what you want to do. This is not going to save you any time to go over and use like a cutting wheel or a hacksaw or anything like that, because you want this guy as perpendicular as you can. I usually do is after I'm done is I give it a little bit of a filing on the end just to deburr it all around the edges. Everybody's got their own style, this kind of stuff. I do not do this that frequently, but when I do, I try to do it right. All right, and then the other piece then is at the very end, because of the way these cutting wheels work. I'll show you this on a bigger one. You know, what you got is a beveled wheel that you just keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and it eventually just cuts right through that. You end up getting this compression all around here, and it reduces the size of the line. So the line should normally be that big, and it's compressed like this. So we have to chew that out too. The larger tools will have a little kind of cutting thing like this on them. You can also use a pocket knife. The smaller ones aren't going to have that. So you just wheel this guy around. Just be careful with it so it doesn't flip back on you and cut you. Just trying to make sure that I get it opened up like it is supposed to be. And then I'll have a little round file or a little pivoted file to go in here and make it nice and smooth. All right, good. So we'll take the armor off. We'll take the other stock fitting off. And then what we'll do is, we said that this guy needed to be 32 inches. So we'll go ahead and measure that. And we'll keep the one factory flare, double flare on the end. And we'll just do the one that we need on the opposite side. Again, the hardest thing probably is the bending. Although some of the people might say the hardest thing is trying to get the tape measure to stay put. All right, 32. And then we'll just cut this piece of pipe, just like we did before. And where I put that mark, I'm just going to make sure that I get the blade right on it, because I don't want to shortchange myself. Tighten it up, and you can see in there how the blade is. Okay, we'll cut this guy off. Those of you that are not super interested in seeing this happen can fast forward ahead to the next part. Next thing we're going to do is cut, and I'm going to measure and cut the armor itself. Of course, when we finish cutting this, we're going to do the same thing on the end that I showed you before. I was just trying to show it to you a couple of different times. And plus, what I'm going to do is, like I said, since I don't do this all the time, I'll take this piece that I'm cutting off as like a scrap piece, and I will use it to do a few practices on the flare with my tools, since I don't do it all the time, before I do it on the one that has to count. Personally, I just find the hardest thing is just to hold the guy and keep him from spinning with the whole set, I mean with the whole tool as you go. I've always been afraid to put these lines like in a vise or anything, because they can get deformed, so just kind of suffer through with it and have patience. 99% of things in life, if you have some patience, they'll end up okay. Okay, there we go. There's the line we're actually going to use, and there's our scrap line that we will use to refresh our memory of doing flares, like riding a bike. Again, same deal, right? I'll just reinforce it. Go inside here and burr this out. And clean up anything on the outside edges so that it feels smooth. It'll make the whole flaring job easier. Of course, when you're all done with this, you'll want to blow all this debris out with compressed air before you actually put everything on, because you don't want a little piece of metal filing in there in the brake line. Right, so there's an example of one. It's all nice and smooth. There's nothing rough. There's nothing sharp. That's what you're aiming for. So like I said, we'll use this one. I might even, after the video, cut it in half and use it as an additional one. So now I'm going to take this and do the same thing. This is the line that I'm going to want to use. And then the last thing I'm going to have to do on this is the armor. So I'm going to pause this. I'm going to take care of this one, and then we will come back and pick it up with the armor. All right, just finishing this up. And like I said, then we're going to go on to the armor itself. This guy just felt a little sharp to me, so I wanted to go over them again. Okay. Just want to spend a little bit extra time on this one because it is the one I care about. It's not the scrap one, this is the actual one. All right, there's our line, 32 inches. Now we're going to measure out our spring. I think I wrote down here 26 1/4. This will be even more difficult to hold. Be like holding a snake. 26 1/4. Okay, so what I'm going to do to cut this guy, I'm going to take a little flathead screwdriver, wedge him in here, and I'm going to then use that to let me prise this a bit, bend it up, so that I can hopefully get in here with a pair of snips and take this guy out. A little bit more. Might not cut with these. I got another tool here if this doesn't do it. Okay, we'll give it the big guns. Get some tin snips here. That's not working either. There it goes. All right. And then kind of like the same kind of deal here. This has got like a sharp end on it, so we will just file that down. Mostly just because I don't want to get all cut or scratched by accidentally forgetting about this when I go to install the line. All right. Now we're going to open up our new fitting, start assembling this guy. So put our new fitting in. Going to be one end. Put our armor on. And put our other fitting in. Other GM fitting. Again, just remember that the thread end is going to touch the flare, and the hex head end is going to be towards the spring. At this point, I'm going to head over to the garage and we will flare. We'll put a double flare on the end of this, and then we will start the bending and we'll reinstall it. All right, we are in my garage and I'm going to get ready to flare this, which is the last step in the assembly. There's a lot of different kits. This particular one I have, I use it. I probably have had this kit 15 years, and I probably have used it 4 or 5 times in the whole time I've had it. But the way this one works is you've got these little dies, and you need to get the pipe leveled off with the ridge of the die, and then you tighten down this jig and it holds it in place. And there's actually teeth inside on this particular model, inside this pipe where it fits, and it'll leave some indentations. And I can show you on one of the things I did to remind myself how this works. A little practice when you see these little ridges. That's to prevent the pipe from moving, so you don't have to torque the Jesus out of it in order to get it to go. Excuse me. So anyway, I'm just going to try to make sure I have got this guy exactly where he needs to be, because I do not want to do this again. Just bear with me just a second. And then when I have him where I want him, I'm going to tighten him up by hand. And then I'm going to take the handle and tighten it up even more. Get it nice and snug because I do not want it to move. I'm actually going to tighten the vise itself to hold the whole tool assembly. And the next thing I like to do is put a little lubricant on. All I really do is dip this in some brake fluid. I don't like to use anything else in case it rolls down the pipe, but I like to get some brake fluid up here for the same reason why if you were using cutting oil, if you were cutting metal, a little bit of lubricant here can't hurt anything. And then this particular tool, it's got a little alignment pin that goes in here and it sits on top. And then it's got this little piece here that climbs up and it's going to be used to push it down. And that's what we're going to use to do the first flare, first part of the flare, because we're going to do a double flare for a brake line. First flare will be done like this. And on this particular tool, I mean, they're all different kinds. This particular one, all we're going to do is we're going to tighten this down until we flatten and bottom out this die and deform the metal for the first flare. And you'll know on these various tools, it'll be kind of obvious when you get to the bottom because you will feel yourself bottomed out. I like to take a quick glance at level and I see, yep, it is bottomed out. So now I'm going to remove the tool. Go kind of slow because it's going to go in the other direction on you. Get this guy out of the way and remove the die. You can see there's the first part of the flare. And now we're going to take the other end of the tool without the die. And what this part will do, this beveled head on here, is then going to bend the metal in on itself, and that'll complete the double part of the flare, which is necessary for a brake line. Some lines, like fuel line, you wouldn't bother with it, but for a brake line, it is absolutely mandatory. Safety thing. You don't want any leaks with this. And it's a very similar kind of deal. You're just going to tighten it down until it feels like it has bottomed out. Don't want to go too far. And then after that, release. And it should be done. There we go. Double flare brake line. Again, there's those ridges I was telling you about that it used to hold it, but they don't cause any problem at all. All right, so now the special kind of nut, you can see there's some, GM has several of these nuts, but the one we wanted was the one with the inverted flare. Fits on the top of that flare, and then this other guy will fit into the fitting. All right, now we're ready to do the bends. Break, go back to where we were and do that. Let's do this last part, which are the bends. So, if I can find my, there he is. First bend we're going to do is we're going to figure out where the spring sits. There's a small bend here, very, very small bend here and here. I don't know if you guys can notice them. They're opposing each other. We'll do those first because they keep the spring from moving. So we are, actually it's probably easier to do it this way with the lip of the tape measure. It's exactly 2.5. And then we'll add on our little piece here, which is another, looks like another 1/4. And a little bit more, 3/8. 3/8, so 2 3/8, I think is what I said. Sorry, 2.5 plus 3/8, so I'll put it right up underneath there. We will pick this end for that. And our spring back. Getting right into where we want him to be. Get our first mark. Double check. So I love how the spring smeared all the mark there, but you get the gist. All right. Sorry about that phone ringing in the background. And then the deal with this is you're just going to go nice and slow. Lay it down here on the ground, actually. Get these pieces out of the way. So this first bend is just a very small bend. I'm going to use a tool like this because with the armor on it, the bending pliers just aren't going to cut it. So even though we're not going to do any really severe bends until we get back here. I'm going to try and use this tool for the whole enchilada. All right, so I'm going to pop this guy in. Like I said, we'll use a slightly larger mount for this because we have the armor on it. And then I'm just going to give him a slight bend, just a slight bend. And that will be our first one. And that'll kind of begin to keep our spring from sliding once we do the second one. All right, so now we can see there's another bend right about there. So get our pen, mark this one, and with our first bend kind of to the right, our next bend is kind of towards the bottom. Same kind of deal. Get him in here, and then just give him a little bit of a bend. Okay, got that one. Our spring is finally, starting to settle into place and not moving around as much. All right, so now we got our first sharp bend right here. What we can always do, we can always use our spring to know that we're in the right place lengthwise. So there's our first sharp bend, and it's going to go off to the right, or the left rather, sorry about that. And I'm just measuring this a bunch of different times because I want to have the same position. If it's a little bit off, of course, I can move it a little bit after it's already in the vehicle. We'll start this bend. We won't do it all the way yet. We'll just start it. Just want to make sure it's in the spot I expected. You just keep going just like this all the way over the entire pipe until you get it exactly matching the previous part. And again, it's one of those things that just requires patience. Make another bend here, and we're going to go in the down position. I always like to make a double check. Put this a little bit further just so I know for sure. And I'm going to come in the down position. So I'm going to keep going through each of these bends, and I'll come back when we're like over here and we'll pick it up on the last piece. So you can see it takes some time, but we have replicated the line, and I've measured where the bend is, the last 90 degree that we need to do, and the rest of it we can take care of when we get onto the vehicle. Let's see if I can bend this last one with the tool, the bending tool. But with the fitting in the way, I don't know if I can. No, it's not exactly where I need it. So something else you can do, you can either get a pair of bending pliers, or rather than stopping the video again, I'm just going to take these are some pliers that have a nylon insert so they don't squeeze or damage anything. And I'm just going to grab it right here and bend this guy around. Very similar to what you'd do if you had bending pliers. And that'll complete the last 90 where it goes into the wheel cylinder itself. The rest of it I'll probably leave and test fit as I line it up. So there we go. So again, you got to be patient, got to have the right tools, and you got to start with the right parts, and you got to do a lot of measuring at each of these bends and go very slowly and carefully, and you can replicate this part and it's going to be exactly the way General Motors intended it to be. So let's get it on the vehicle and fit the rest of this bend so that we can get it mounted up, and then we'll be all done. To install this, I'm going to remove the little red dust cover from the new wheel cylinder over here. Take that guy out. Then I'm going to edge under here and unscrew this little cap I put into the brake block just to keep it from leaking too much. Take this end and we're going to run it behind the shock and on the top of this vent hose. And I'm going to get the wheel cylinder side in first. Okay, so I got him positioned. And I'm going to get it into the block second, and then I'm going to get it into these little welded on retaining clips. Then, see, I'm going to get this side started by hand with a fitting. It's always a good idea to start it by hand. This guy over here. This guy, since we kind of had to replicate the bends, might have to move him around a little bit before he gets to where we can tighten it up. It also might be possible that you can't get in here without taking the wheel cylinder back off. That's what I'm beginning to realize. So we've got our line done, but I think I'm going to end up having to pull the wheel back off in order to tighten it up, because there's not a lot of clearance in here is the problem on these particular vehicles. So I'm going to tighten up this side over here. I'll secure these two clips back down with just a little plastic hammer. Just do like this here and just get them back into position. They just retain lines so that it doesn't move. Having these armor pieces on here keeps them from compressing anyway. Alright, so I will show you how I'm going to pull that wheel cylinder off just enough to tighten it up. I'll go ahead and show you that. And then the only thing left after that is to tighten up the other side and to re-bleed the brake, and you're done. So I'll show you that last piece and then we'll wrap it up. Actually, right after I stopped filming, I figured out I wouldn't have to pull this wheel. After I got a better angle, I realized what was happening was the flare end wasn't sitting flush on the wheel cylinder, and that was why I couldn't get it in enough to tighten up the fitting. And what I ended up doing is just, it's a new line, so it's got maybe some slightly off bends. And so I came in here with this big screwdriver and I just gently gave it a bend up while I held it here, because apparently the original one had a slight upward bend to it. And once I did that, it popped right in, and I was able to take my 9/16 crowfoot and get in here and snug it up. And again, there's no real torque on these. You can't get anything in there anyway, but I like to do them just so that they're nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten them. At this point, all I'm going to do is bleed this new wheel cylinder out, and the vehicle's back in service. So I hope this helped you out about bending and shaping armored steel brake lines to get an original OEM look back to the truck, or even if it's on a car, on a General Motors vehicle, as well as flaring and cutting the lines and cutting the armor itself. If you found the video helpful, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.